Dear friends, we have so far looked at research, how to draw up a protocol and conduct a study. At the end of this process, you will end up with results and conclusions on hopefully a very good study. The next thing you do is present it at a conference with what is normally called a podium presentation. PowerPoint is the usual program that we use for giving these presentations. For your presentation to be effective, it is a skill that one has to learn. And over the next 20 minutes, I hope to give you some basic principles about giving presentations. I'll be talking about the goals of presentations, the principles of how to put together a presentation, and principles of how to design a slide to make an effective presentation. The goals of any presentation is to grab the attention of the audience. You've got to make them listen to you. You have some information to give those information as a set of crisp messages, and you give it in such a way that they retain these messages for a long time. To achieve this, practice is important. It was very common for me in the earlier days to stand in front of a mirror and practice a presentation. I would look at my own body language, the intonation in my voice, and above all, time was an important aspect. Please note that nothing can make up for lack of presentation. PowerPoint and other similar computer programs come with a lot of fancy features. I'll tell you more about it as we go along, but none of that helps unless you have crisp messages to give. These messages have to be in a logical sequence called the storyboard sequence. It must have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And setting the tone refers to what you say to a given audience. It's important for you to know who your audience is. For example, you may have the same set of slides on a given topic, but if you're addressing doctors, you would talk in a given way. If you're addressing nurses, it would be another way. And if you're addressing lay people, it will be yet another different way. And so setting the tone is important. And it is important to get the audience involvement, to keep their attention. If it's a small gathering, one of the best ways is to ask questions or ask for comments and the like, so that the audience is actively involved in your presentation. Normally, we never think about the layout of a hall where we're giving a presentation. But there's a lot of common sense and science behind how you design your hall and where you stand and how you move and what you do. Take this slide for an example. The audience is sitting here. This is the screen. We are looking at an English language presentation or a Kannada language presentation. The words move from left to the right as far as the audience is concerned. Now, you keep your podium where the speaker stands in such a way that it is away from the line of sight from the extreme left audience to the extreme left of the screen here. If you're doing an Urdu presentation, for example, where the writing is from the right to the left, then the podium will have to be placed on the opposite side. Now, the reason for this is that the audience generally tends to look at the speaker first and then put its eye onto the screen and reads as the words are going along. One, you should not come in the way of the audience reading the screen. Second, you cannot have a situation where the audience has to flit its movement at a random fashion. See you here and read from this end, for example. Also, it is a good idea to move a little bit yourself instead of hiding behind the podium, or even better, use the movement of the hands to while you're explaining, and that keeps the audience a little engaged, a little more engaged compared to you standing like a statue and delivering your lecture. That movement should not again impede the sight of the audience, and it should not prevent them from reading the screen. Hence, it is logical that you move in this little area away from the podium but not obstructing the screen. It's good to have a dress code. You can't walk into a serious scientific presentation in a Hawaiian shirt. Formal, simple maybe, but good dress is what is required. You have to stand with your legs slightly apart, shoulders thrown back and erect. If you're squirming and if you're bending over and if you're moving your eyes here and there without an eye contact, it gives the message that you're very nervous and the audience cannot appreciate your presentation when they don't see you as a confident speaker. Eye contact is important. If you have a very large audience where you cannot possibly see everybody, it's good to just have an eye contact with people sitting in the first two rows. And of course, your hands must be free. Never put it in your pockets. It's considered a very rude thing to do. Rehearsing the content and timing is important. Time and again we see people who overshoot the time allotted. And you keep getting notices to say that your lights will be switched off if you overshoot. I don't think we should ever be in that situation. It's good to rehearse and be ready, but the ballpark figure for the time taken is about 1 minute per slide. So if you're given 8 minutes, perhaps, you perhaps have about 12 or 13 slides. But if you end up with 25 slides for an 8-minute presentation, it's very clear that you cannot finish it. Check the hardware. The hardware that you made your presentation in, particularly in regard to fonts, it may not be present in the hardware where you're using it in a hall. So it's good to have that check. There are ways in which you can save the fonts also, but I won't get into it now. Good to have a backup. Go with one pen drive and it doesn't work, have another one. I always email my presentations to myself for one and to the organizer, so that even if my pen drive conks out, I can always download it at the site. As I mentioned, it's a good idea to assess the audience. Computer presentations have many advantages. You can have flexible presentations, you can carry them in your pen drive, you don't have to necessarily carry a laptop nowadays. You have a variety of fonts and colors, graphs, graphics, special effects. You can have voiceovers, add videos. You name it, you can do it. But please remember that a scientific presentation should be simple. If you have a variety of these special effects, your presentation gets hijacked by the special effects rather than what you really want to say and what you really want to convey. And so one should be very careful about this. Let's spend some time on slide design uh, before we close the presentation. A slide has several components. We normally probably do not think about this, but it has a template, it has fonts, graphics, it's got a color scheme, transitions, build effects, and sounds. Let us look at each one of these. A template must be sedate and it must be appropriate to the subject that you're talking. This is obviously an exaggeration, but this is a very complicated template with lots of colors, lots of little fish floating around and a fancy picture in the lower left corner. Now, this is the example of a wrong template. I'm not saying we do this, but it must be very sedate. You cannot have garish pictures, and if you have text in the middle, people will be more interested in the picture rather than your text, and that's what you want them to read. The text is what you want them to read. There must be a good contrast between the background and the letters. If you have a dark background, have light letters, and vice versa. Fonts must be generally sans serif, that is the opposite of what you find in print material. It must be of an appropriate size. 28 to 44 is the usual size that we use for an average size of 100 to 300 audience. So you have to necessarily assess the number of people, assess the size of the hall. It's a must, it's an absolute must to follow the rule of 6 to avoid crowding. The rule is very simple. Use 6 words to a line and not more than that, and use not more than 6 lines to a slide. So if you have whole paragraphs put on your slide and you read it, that is the worst thing you can do. Size is important, so having very small fonts or having an inappropriate look or an inappropriate color is something that you have to avoid. Highlights are important, but it must be subtle. Just underline it perhaps, make that little bit bold, or put it in a different color, that should be good enough. Just because it's available, if you have very special wordings that I have shown here or 3D effects, it will take away the beauty of your presentation. As I said, people will be more interested in all these special effects than what you have to say, and that's not the purpose of your presentation. Graphics have to be relevant and simple. If you have too many pictures on a slide, you will see that it again hijacks the words that you have on the slide. Look at this slide with so many graphics. The graphics are completely masking the letters, the letters that you want the audience to notice. The pictures have no relevance to what I'm going to say, and it makes it very difficult for you to even read the words on the last line. These are the kinds of things that you have to avoid. Obviously, people don't normally do slides like this, but I'm exaggerating the event to make you understand and make you remember that you've got to give attention to these aspects of slide making. Color scheme must be sedate. It's either light color based or dark color based. But if you have something like this with a garish pink background, wrong contrast, red letters, then obviously it makes for a very poor quality slide. You have to avoid red, green and pink, and make sure that your font contrasts well with the background color. Transitions are the way one slide moves on to another. You have to keep it simple. Perhaps you need no transitions at all. But having fancy transitions again distracts the audience. The zooming that you just saw in the transition is rather hard on the eyes. It's not something that is pleasant, and again, it distracts the audience. There's a wide option available on PowerPoint, but you should not get carried away by it. Definitely avoid the random choice. If each slide keeps appearing in a different way, there is no way the audience is going to concentrate and focus on what you're seeing. And if you have build effects on a subsequent slide, it is probably a good idea to avoid transition. If both of them occur in very fancy ways, it beats the purpose of grabbing the audience's attention. Another fancy transition which I think should be avoided. Build effects refers to the way each component of a slide comes onto the slide. There are again very many build effects built into PowerPoint. Use mild ones. Definitely you have to avoid the fancy build effects. Here is an effect of a wrong build effect. See how these pictures are coming onto the slide in such fancy ways that you will be more fascinated by the build effect rather than the content of the graphic. So it should be very subtle, and its only use is to make an impact of the different points that you're making. Just see what happens next. Better to put points on different slides. If you have such build effects for the way the letters are coming, obviously you would not be focusing on what the point is trying to say. This is another example of a bad build effect. Things like this should be really avoided in your scientific presentation. Sounds, you can add a lot of sounds and videos onto your PowerPoint. Only the relevant ones should be done. And if you add sounds into the presentation itself, then it clashes with what you're saying, what your speech is, and it takes away all the good aspects of the presentation. Friends, computer presentation is a boon when used properly. It can be a pain at times when it's abused. Please keep an eye on the mismatch of fonts and software. And also remember that this is a very small example of what PowerPoint can do. You can have a lot of things that can be done. And I'm really thinking that we should have a day's workshop on how to put PowerPoint to good use. Various things like building up teaching modules, building interactive sessions, having a quiz with a timer, with a scorer and things like that. But of course, that's a subject for another day. You must keep your attention on software compatibility, particularly fonts, sounds and colors. And if you have large data, it's a good idea not only to have a large capacity pen drive, but also have cloud storage. Put it on the cloud so that wherever you are, you can download it if you have any problems or any glitches. Thank you very much for your patient listening.